organisms also use energy in terms of protecting themselves from being eaten. So when we think about this, one of the big examples is in plants. So if you look at plants, they seem to just like be this source of energy that is just sitting out there unprotected and just waiting to be eaten. So what do plants do in order to protect themselves? Well, some of them produce thorns, like in the case of roses. Some of them also produce chemicals. So we can talk about plants and chemical protection. And this is one of the reasons why plants are so important as sources of medicine, because they have evolved these really interesting chemicals that can do a lot of interesting things to our physiology. So they might be protective for the plants, but maybe we could take whatever it is that they do, like elevate heart rate or increase kidney function or whatever, and we could use those to use as medicines. So when we talk about chemical protection, a lot of plants produce chemicals that are called alkaloids. And these tend to be bitter tasting. So even things like broccoli have alkaloids in them. And so even like Brussels sprouts have alkaloids in them. So you don't want to eat like an excessive amount of those particular foods. I have done it and I recommend not doing it. So there are chemicals that are in plants that we sometimes, or that we have actually developed ways of using to prevent the food, for example, from going bad or spoiling. So the example here is looking at the different uses of spices and plants in preserving foods. So foods tend to spoil because of bacteria or fungi that get into them, and or mold, say for example, and start to break them down and use them for their own resources. And so if we look at as in a place like India, where it is warm climate, we can see that there are lots of spices, lots of plants like garlic and onion and ginger and cumin and cardamom and turmeric that are important in preserving their foods. And so that is why they have developed a food that is very spicy. When we look at Norway, they use not very many of those spices because they don't live in a warm climate. And so their food tends to not spoil as quickly. And so when we look at bacteria in particular, we can see that a lot of these things inhibit bacterial growth. So this is very interesting. You might look at, say, for example, turmeric. So turmeric is now considered to be the new anti-inflammatory drug. And so along with turmeric and specifically, we need the not the capsaicin, but we need the pepper. So we need turmeric and pepper together, allow that turmeric to do its job a little bit better. And so we have now discovered another use for turmeric in our medicine. Now, some animals also evolve chemical deterrents to being eaten. So when we look at poisonous frogs, for example, if you've ever been to the tropics, you know that you don't want to touch any brightly colored frog. So the tree frogs that are camouflaged and look green and hide themselves through camouflage generally are okay to touch, but anything that is brightly colored is generally poisonous. And so the poison arrow dart frogs, if organisms eat them, they have skin glands that produce toxins that will kill the organism. And so organisms adapt a deterrent, and they avoid eating those. We can also talk about the monarch butterfly, specifically like its caterpillars. Animals will eat them and they will spit them out. They do not taste good and they are poisonous. Now, some animals have gone a different route where they actually evolve colors that mimic a poisonous species, but they themselves are not poisonous. And so, in the case of these snakes, the one on the A, which would be on the right, right? So that is the non-poisonous one. And the B one is the poisonous one. And there is like a mnemonic device to remember which one is poisonous. Red on yellow, red on black. I can't remember what it is, but one of them tells you that it's poisonous and one of them tells you that it's not poisonous. So instead of using energy for protection and producing these chemicals, which take energy to produce, they mimic poisonous species instead. So that is a very interesting strategy.